Hello, this is Zeus, Dr. Zeus, actually. Coming back with you, week 5. This is actually going to be the Ask Dr. Zeus section for weeks 4 and 5. And this week we're going to get into how do thinking and feeling impact one another. And I'm going to do a little bit more applied work on what I call my emotion continuum, or you can also say the affective spectrum. So, again, the focus here is really to get you to be able to apply your understanding of emotions. What you'll see too much in academic materials, and we'll discuss that a little bit today, is a thinking-oriented mentality toward dealing with a feeling issue. It doesn't actually work that way. As I've stressed in the past, well, it doesn't work to just be unthinkingly feeling either, and impulsive. The whole notion is to get thinking and feeling to have a conversation and a relationship with one another, where they impact and inform each other. So we'll go ahead, and that will be mostly what we focus on today. How do thinking and feeling impact each other? How can they relate? And what happens when they don't? So let's go straight to some notes that I've made for this week and Ask Dr. Zeus weeks 4 and 5. Week 5, how do thinking and feeling impact each other? As before, I have this thing I call the emotion continuum because it was easier for someone to see that in terms of the title. But actually, as I said, it's affect. Affect is the whole complex, this whole complex of what we consider feeling-oriented or heart-based and hormonally based interactions with the world. As you see from last week, I made 5 distinct kinds of points on the affective spectrum. Instinct, emotional impulse, emotion, feeling, and mood, and I define these. But generally speaking, they go from a much denser, lower frequency, direct, brief, simple reaction or response that has an object in which there is very little choice, and oftentimes, at least on this end, it's very unconscious and reflexive. Now, when I say reflexive, that means like a reflex. That's as opposed to reflective, right here, which means using appraisal, consciousness, thinking to engage. So as we move along the spectrum from instinct toward mood, generally speaking, we're going from a denser, lower frequency to a higher frequency understanding. Now, as you get up here to the higher frequency, what happens is you get the experience is less direct. In many ways, it's more distributed. It's like, what am I feeling? A great way to look at it is, the examples I've used here is if you think about hate or even lust, right? Very clear feelings with very clear objects. I hate that person, or what would I do with that person? These are very clear. It's brief, it's intense. There really not a lot of choice there. It's immediate. It's an attraction or it's a reaction. Then you go up the spectrum from that more low frequency, immediate, direct, object-driven thing up the spectrum towards something like love, which can be a feeling, even a mood. Being in love, walking around in a cloud, that's kind of a mood. And you notice that is, you can't quite wrap your hands around that. It's much more complex. It's less tangible, you're less able to wrap your hands around. It's not short, it's extended, it's more comprehensive. So you get the basic idea here. As we move up the affective spectrum, we get from a much lower density, lower frequency, easier, more direct, easier to understand, to something that's a lot more complex. We have to kind of explore around it a little bit. So the first practical thing we're going to do here is to note that with this spectrum, you can get something called a cascade. That is, from the instinct end of things, if we allow ourselves to consistently be driven by fear, that tends to kick itself down the line, okay? In other words, if we have a fearful mentality or very traumatic, fearful experience that determines our life, oftentimes that can leak into emotional impulses. We can maybe strike out at someone because we feel that fear. This develops more sense of emotions, of danger, and the world is a dangerous place. And then that gives you into this feeling of dread, right? And this mood of pessimism. Do you see how that can happen? Where in instinct, if you had several reactions, intense reactions over a long period of time, they could drive these emotional impulses of pushing people away, thinking the world is a dangerous place, into emotions of dread, or into emotions that end up picking out particular instances and reinforcing that notion, feelings of dread and moods of pessimism. But it can also go the other way. As you will know, when perhaps something happened, a boss yelled at you at work for no reason, and then that goes down to a feeling of, my day's not going so well, and an emotion of anger. And maybe that was taken out on a dog, kicking or roughly shoving away dog. And again, that's maybe that's more of an emotional impulse again. And then that is already embedding itself in your unconsciousness. That's creating a train of thinking and a train of feeling that begins to embed itself into you. So it's important to understand this spectrum, because it's not as if these are separate things. Oftentimes when we talk about them separate, but they're related and they can cascade forward and backwards. Why is that important? It's important for a couple of reasons. One, it's important because we want to be able to interrupt this cascade, right? When you are feeling bad and you allow it to gain momentum and you allow these things to keep spilling through, they tend to gain force and we have less direct control over them. So that's one thing. A second thing I talked about here has to do again with flooding or overwhelm. We talked about that. A lot of times what happens when all this cascade happens, we get flooded with emotions and we just shut down. Here are a couple of other reasons that I've already listed here. Cascade. Unexamined instincts drive emotional impulse, emotion, feeling, and mood. We talked about that, an example of that. Again, the key word here is unexamined. By interrupting a cascade, we have the ability then to examine the different parts of it, to stop the action temporarily, to just blow a whistle like a referee at the game and go, shoot, foul, or timeout, and take the time to actually do the replay. Look through it and see, in fact, more closely how these things are relating. Then there's the unexamined mood I talked about, which predisposes certain feelings, emotions, and emotional impulses and instinct going the other direction. What we want to do is to develop conscious ability to intervene, to stop the cascade, to experiment and interrupt. So that's basically what sort of the general practical lesson here. So let's move on to the second page. Here's a quote I just came to my mind. Emotions are not simply problems to solve, but rather sources of wisdom. Again, this is an important thing because if you read purely academic papers, they tend to rest wholly on the thinking aspect of things and almost no engagement experientially with emotions. They're trying to use a purely mentalized framework to examine emotions, and that's seriously limited. It's not really respecting emotions, but seeing them as something intervening with the higher intellectual processes. And that's a bias. I think it's an unmerited bias. It's more a reflection of the cultural, mental, and upbringing of the intellectual, him or herself, or the academic, which is almost completely aligned to the analytical. If you notice, almost all academic work is critical or analytical in nature, and not very much is it's passionate or emotional in nature. So there's a huge bias there. We're going to try to correct that bias now by developing what I call the emotion triangle, okay? So it has three components, okay? And the first component here, I'll just move it up, okay, is the impulsive, indulgent, and permissive id, right? This is kind of the Captain Kirk corner. He's always being impulsive. He's always trying to bed women, and he's always trying to, take on some kind of alien monster, right? But there's some charm to that, but you're just trying to shake your head going, dude, there's a better way to do that. And then, of course, we jump over here to the Spock end of the point of the triangle that tends to emphasize controlling emotions, repressing spontaneous feeling, judging things logically, etc., or what might be called the ego, okay? And what neither one of these has is another point. Usually we talk about emotions on one end over here, what I call feeling without thinking on one end here, and on the other end we have feeling without thinking on this end here on the left end, and then we have thinking without feeling on the other end, you know. And sometimes people try to fit in the middle, but the point is not moderation but elevation. Okay, in these two models, feeling without thinking and thinking without feeling, you notice there is a kind of zero-sum game, an either-or understanding of thinking and feeling, as if the two of them were warring with each other, and in the middle there's some kind of compromise or détente, where they learn to live with each other. What neither one of these models has is a notion that both of them are actually great strengths of human character and human existence and human being, and the most amenable or most productive way for these two to relate is to have emotion and feeling actually respect each other and have a conversation. That's what I have up here. So that's what I call the elevated rather than moderated understanding of the relationship between thinking and feeling. And in that, I say a healthy relationship with emotion. You have collaboration, it's creative, there's a mutual respect between what emotion brings into the situation and what thinking brings into the situation. And most importantly, an ultimate respect for how thinking can improve and enhance emotion's ability to help us experience life, and vice versa. How feeling can help us really delve into and give life to purely abstract thinking by making it contact with our lives, our loves, our understandings, our passions in the world. So this is extremely important if you want to be a graduate student, because if you end up just doing something for purely intellectual reason, it's going to be dry, and it's going to be hard to finish your dissertation. If you're passionate about it, it's tied into what you experience in an area of passion or interest, going to be much easier. And this is true of those who are not planning to go on to graduate school. Think about it in terms of work or family life. And we're going to come into some examples about this. So if we really concentrate as this is the ideal situation for this class, which is there's a healthy relationship where thinking and feeling are in conversation with each other, then we can really begin to do some things like using our critical analysis and our creative ability to find ways or tools to help us advance both thinking and feeling. So I've already kind of gotten to some of these tools. I talked about surprise as a great tool to help disrupt old patterns and to really open up the mind. Positive addiction, I talked about mindfulness and the research around that to help one calm one's feelings enough to be able to reflect, observe, and think about them in ways that will help us learn into them. And non-judgment. If I haven't specifically stated that, I've more or less implied that, okay? There's one other option here, by the way, and we've mentioned it before, and that's what happens down here, right? Shutdown, where there's neither thinking nor feeling, where there's paralysis, overwhelm, and flooding. When you have too much hit you and boom, everything goes down. No thinking, no feeling, you're feeling numb. And that's what happens when you just get overtaxed. Perhaps you have a full-time job, you're trying to take care of a family and go to school full-time. That obviously is what happens in milder cases, but also in nervous breakdown as well. So this is not to be neglected or short-sighted. You actually can, when you're starting to feel the shutdown or overwhelm, it's a good and highly, highly important indicator. It really means you got to step back. Otherwise, it's like when you're right on the edges, not getting enough sleep, and you're just feeling that little tick in your throat like you're going to get sick. That's just an important indicator. It's time to really get some sleep. Even if it means certain things aren't going to be done, you send emails out, you decide, okay, I'm going to take maybe not as great a grade on this, but I'm going to get it done because my health is important. So the goal here is the conscious exploration and development of emotional intelligence and range and depth. So there we are. Um, we want to use these charts that I've just provided. And I'm going to also provide you with the introductory chapter to my dissertation, which is actually a really personal account of why I explored the topic of self-esteem like I did. So we'll use these charts and that chapter, and I'll have you read that chapter, to find something deep, broad, and rich to work on for the group assignment and final motivation project in this class. If you just happen to be a person wandering in off the street to see this, just think about it as anything. The group assignment really has to do with working on a particular problem that you're facing right now and working through the emotional components. And the final motivation project really has to do with trying to work with some goals or something you're passionate about, developing an understanding of motivation around it. So here's a good framework or outline. No matter who you are, or no matter what your problem is, or what your passion is, this is a good 1, 2, 3 step. Look into your past for persistent, challenging emotional patterns or dynamics, especially family. Family is very, very key to this. So this is what I would call a motivating challenge. Look for a motivating challenge. Step 2, look into your being to find encouraging and inspiring, joy-oriented passions or interests. This is what I call your creative incentive. The thing that pulls you forward, right? The thing that challenges you, the thing that pulls you forward. And finally, combine the two and explore and create. Remember these themes that we have: capable, critical, creative, and compassionate. So you want to combine these two, right? The motivating challenge and the creative incentive to come up with a kind of collaborative application. Is there some way where you can use our creative incentive and the motivating challenge, bring them together and create some kind of collaborative application or innovation? I'll give you a quick example about how it worked with my dissertation. In my family life, I became very interested, because a really tough father, about not being valued by another and what that meant. This led me into an exploration of self-worth and self-esteem. So that was my motivating challenge. My creative incentive was, my drive was to create an approach or an understanding or philosophy that values all perspectives in being, right? I didn't want to win out. I wanted it to be available to everyone. So that was my insight, and that was my creative incentive. And finally, my collaborative application or innovation had to do with developing a conversation-based interpersonal model for self-esteem rather than a purely cognitive or individually based model of self-esteem. I realized that most self-esteem came in relationships, coaching, mentoring, good parenting. And I'm like, why are we doing all these silly self-esteem tests that just emphasize the individual personality when in fact real self-worth and understanding happens in relationships? So I was able to apply that to education, and I had what I considered to be quite a successful dissertation. It passed with flying colors, and I'm here today. So we will give you a couple of real-life applications with regard to how to use understanding of thinking and feeling, critical analysis plus sort of creative engagement to come up with how to understand any process. So for one, Dr. Seuss's class prep and design. It's a developmental process. What's the context? Context. A lot of you didn't know this. Actually, Alyssa let you know later on, but I had a 1-week lead time due to an administrative snafu in terms of actually preparing for this class. I didn't have access to it till a week before the class was actually started. So I was using a template, basically an established, going down here, established class syllabus or design, right? To kind of build the plane while flying. A lot of you are like, does this guy know what he's doing? Actually, I do, but I have to make choices, catch up, try to build the plane while flying. And the compensation, like I said, I'm not doing it for the money. My take-home pay is $156 per week, not per day, per week for this class. I'm used to making $150 per hour. So, and I'm being paid for just a little over 7 hours. I don't know how they come with 7.07 hours per week, and clearly I've been putting in a lot more hours than that, easily 3 to 4 times as much as that, just to try to get this class off the ground. But again, I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about the class. I'm committed to the students in this class. not simply for my own ego or not simply obviously for the big money, but because this is such a fascinating, comprehensive, and incisive and completely critical skill. I said, I'd really like to do a little learning myself and find ways to integrate this material for others. So my goals were to integrate the material, including lower the number of evaluations so it's more reasonable for you and for me, to simplify objectives and to streamline the class, to gear it toward real-life application, and to prune down the materials. And you can see I'm beginning to do these in the ways I'm trying to summarize the materials. So, and finally, we have the experiment with experiment that I'm conducting in the emerging situations. I begin to do things, play around with things like rewrite the assignments, try to simplify them a little bit. The quick start guide was to help you sort of understand where I'm coming from. We have the discussion board and the question of the week. That's my application. I even explored some alternatives to Blackboard Learn, including the Outlook, trying to use the Outlook as sort of my medium, and thinking about using Facebook for discussion. As of now, these are both on ice. Outlook turned out not to be a very good one because it stacks emails in such a way that it makes it difficult to individually respond to them when I send out a class mailing list. So sometimes experiment and learn. And Facebook, some people didn't have a Facebook thing, even though it's better for a group conversation. And then I would have to take that material and post it back as a grade. Whereas the Blackboard Learn allows me to do that directly from your comments. So in the end, it was a good try, but it didn't quite work. So I'm sticking basically with the Blackboard approach. And then finally, I got sick, just had communication to use saying, hey, I'm going to be out of commission a little while, but don't worry, you know, I'll have your material back to you and things graded, and I'll be able to catch up. So the final thing was that I wanted to free up more of your time to work on bigger projects. Right, we've done a lot of diverging. We've gathered a lot of material. Now I want that material to converge in ways that will stick with you after the class is done and that can be useful to you. So the results are, we're getting there. We're improving. That's the main thing. And we're both being quite forgiving to each other. I haven't nailed anyone for deadlines right now, and you've all been very good about completing the work and or letting me know. The main thing, again, was I didn't want it to go to be too crazy. I want us to be able to move along with the material together, but exceptions are allowed. So that brings us into real life application number 2, which is work deadlines for you. As a reminder, like I said here, I do want you to get into groups of 4 or 5. We are going to start working together. So if you do have those, some have sent that they've worked in groups before, or that I think about half of you, like 15 of you, actually live in the city of Yuma. So you might want to get 3 or 4 of get 4 or 5 of you into 3 different groups, just based on the fact that you live in Yuma. That would be a great idea. Others, there are several of you who are military families. There's at least 4 or 5 of you that strongly want to pursue research in this area and go to graduate school, either as PhD students or as master's students. That would be a good basis upon which to group, because then you can tilt your presentation maybe toward a more research-driven agenda. Again, it's up to you. I'm quite open to that. If you can get 4 or 5 people together, do it. If you just say, hey, listen, I don't really know anyone, I'm open, then you'll be thrown into the pot, and that should work for both of us. So the goals here, the context here. There's a very large class size. I talked about it, batch grading. As long as we keep mostly together, it should work. It's online. There are different time schedules, ages, etc., different life situations. So we need a little bit more of an adaptable framework when it comes to work deadlines and pre-existing factors, divorce, surgery, ailing parent, etc. People have had serious things happening in their lives. Now, again, some professors and some people think that you aren't taking the class seriously unless you're rigid and strict about everything. To me, I just put it out there. I'll respect you, and I expect respect back as well. I have a fairly straightforward evaluation technique. I can tell when people are engaging. I can tell when people are just putting in work, and usually the grade reflects that. And again, I don't judge. If that's what you want to do, and you put in mediocre work and get a C just because you need to pass the class and you've got other things to do or you're not that interested, okay, that's a choice you make. But my hope is that you'll get really into this, able to apply it to your life and create specific examples and ties that you'll not only get an A, but you'll have something to take away that'll be very useful for you. So the goals were to maximize your learning. Here we are, okay. Enjoyment, application. Remember, we said the more joy you have with your learning, the greater your ability to learn, and the more threat you associate with the learning, the less so. If I'm coming down hard on you, I'm going to increase your level of threat. You're not going to learn as well. So there's the goal is also to stay up with the material. You don't want this to be an ongoing practice for any individual or for the class, because we do want to move along. Some of this is foundational. If we don't get it, it makes it harder for all of us to talk later on. Here's a good one. Flex time, even at work, right, is now becoming more of a reality. Just getting something done on an arbitrary deadline is becoming less important than just spending time on it over a course of a certain period of time. So by doing that, by allowing you to have choice, this tends to, quote, increase the quality and durability of your work. That's more important to me. And it's becoming more reality even in the world of work. So these people say, well, you wouldn't get away with that if it were for work. I'm like, yeah, actually, you would get away with it. There's actually a whole hiring and temporary agency that is now working specifically with flex time people. And I think it's going to become more time. So a little limited flex time in this class is fine. So the experiment is experimented with saying, simply let me know, right? Allow a flex time on a per case basis. The work templates that I give to you allow you to monitor your own progress and grades. Again, it's more important for me not to be on you. I can't. There's too many students. But by allowing you to monitor it in a nice little template, it serves a purpose just as well, and allows you to have more responsibility and allows me to be able to conserve my time. And finally, the results so far are good. People are using it when they need. That is, letting me know when they need a little extra time. Even one person said, "Listen, my life is crazy right now. I'm going to turn this in an extra day late on Monday instead of Sunday." That's fine. Obviously, I don't want your life to be crazy every week. But being able to manage and have some flexibility is helpful. Okay, and then finally keeping up and not using it all the time. It's all been really great. And I have to say too, the level of your work is very high quality, so I'm not worried about this. People are quoting full citations of academic sources when I haven't even asked for that, or just, and it's very clear to me that you have a very high regard in terms of precision and quality in your work. So, so that gives me confidence in going forward to really start more moving toward the application. And that's really what we're going to focus on more now. So that pretty much wraps up this week. I hope it's been interesting, and it has been for me. I've been recovering from being sick, but like a lot of times sick, it helps to clear my brain out. And now I'm back. So I look forward again to working with you. And I will, just after this video, also construct another one that has to do with this week, more explicitly the academic readings and so forth. So look for that. Okay, that'll be week 5. I think it'll say something like the impact of thinking and learning, or thinking and feeling on each other. Okay, until then, that's Dr. Zeus checking out. All right.